One of the most difficult aspects of creating comics is creating characters that people can connect to, care about, and remember. There are quite a few things to consider when creating your characters, both internally and externally. An effective method of creating a character or a cast of characters that people can connect with is by understanding them as people and using that to inform not just their actions and their reactions, but also their worldview and how they look. Let's see how we can construct some characters using these internal guidelines. But before I start, let's construct a character called Mouse and use that to click the subscribe button. Okay, that one didn't work. Please subscribe. Now, the guides I mentioned are mostly about constructing our character's personality. It will encompass their worldview, their primary emotions, and their personal goals. But understanding the characters internally can help inform our decision making when creating the visuals for that character. Pixar are usually really great at visualizing characters and putting over the emotions and personalities of that character through the visuals. The example I'm going to use is Inside Out. The 5 primary emotions that are depicted in that film are anger, joy, disgust, fear, and sadness. Now, if you've never seen the film, you could probably have a pretty good understanding of which character represents which emotions just based on their visuals. And emotions are a really good foundation for establishing our characters. They don't need to be extreme or caricatures like in Inside Out, but it's a good starting point. Maybe you could create your characters based on the 4 seasons or by using certain characteristics of animals. Maybe it's a combination of people that you know or based on past experiences that you've dealt with. Maybe you imagine how you would react to a scenario and then get your characters to react in the exact opposite way. It's important to include your own voice and worldview in your characters because it can help with the authenticity of those characters. But if you do this too much, then your characters might seem like they are all the same. Now, using those emotions and personality traits can inform how your characters are going to look. Like in Inside Out, for example, a character who is angry might be more rigid or boxy in shape. If a character is evil, their eyes might be smaller and their features may be sharper. And if a character is happy and joyous, maybe their features are more round and soft. Perhaps you could even subvert expectation, where your angry characters are actually really joyous, and your joyous looking characters are really evil. Now, drawing people is really hard. It's really, really hard. So it might be tempting to draw everyone in the same way. And although this is very understandable, it's better to take a risk so that your characters can be different and you can distinguish one character from the next. This also helps them be a bit more memorable. I myself am very guilty of drawing characters with same face, but this is a habit I myself am trying to break. And even the pros do it. If you look at Jim Lee's art, for example, sometimes it's difficult to tell whether you're looking at Clark Kent or Bruce Wayne. Now, there's no shade on Jim Lee, he's amazing, but it just goes to show how easy it is to draw the same face, particularly when you fall into a particular formula or style. Now, you don't need to get super technical or scientific with this stuff, and how much information you need will depend on the particular character. If a character is really complex and has lots of different details, you'll probably need more information in your character sheets. But if your characters are relatively simple in design, you may only need 1 or 2 poses for your reference. A character sheet usually has a full body image of the character, facing forwards. Sometimes that's enough, but sometimes you might need a forwards and side, sometimes you might need forward, side and back, sometimes you might need forward, side, back and 3/4, maybe top, maybe bottom. It entirely depends on the character and how much information that you need for your reference. And in addition to that, you'll also want close-ups of the face. And again, you might only need a front face, maybe front and side. Now, to take this one step further, you might also want to have the close-up of the face and different expressions as well. We all express slightly differently, so having your different characters express the same emotions but in different ways can also help bring out their personality and make them a bit more different. But ultimately, it's up to you how much information and prep work you want. Deadlines are a thing, and so sometimes you might not have the luxury of creating those character sheets, but if you do have the time and the patience, it's definitely worth it. You'll start to develop these intimate relationships with your characters, and the more you feel that these characters are real people with real histories and real worldviews, the more authentic and memorable they'll become. And also, they'll become a bit more fun to draw because it feels like you're drawing your friends, which I understand sounds really sad and a bit lonely, but It is. Now, when you're drawing your expressions, it can be quite difficult to think about exactly how the face is going to look, and particularly when it comes to the more subtle expressions. Like, we can all imagine anger, but what's the difference between someone being angry and someone being terrified? Maybe someone's slightly nervous or slightly concerned. How do you draw those things? And how do you differentiate those expressions? Well, if we take the 5 emotions from Inside Out, and if you're a Darwin fan, you can throw in surprise as well. Deep cuts. You can take those individual emotions and you can put them on a scale. Let's say you put them on a scale of 1 to 5. And if we take anger, if 1 is slightly annoyed, then 5 is furious. With fear, if 1 is concerned, then 5 is terrified. You get the idea. And you can use that scale to pick and choose which expression is most appropriate for the scene. If someone's being chased by an axe murderer, they'll probably be closer to the 5 on the fear scale than the 1. But maybe they are close to the 1, and that's part of their personality. Maybe they just don't experience that much fear. Who knows? Further from this, you can also take 2 of these base emotions and you can combine them together. So maybe you can combine the 5 of joyous, so ecstatic, with the 2 of anger. You combine those 2 together, maybe that's your supervillain. They love being a supervillain, and maybe they're quite psychotic. That's quite a good combination to use in that example, like the Joker. And the same is true for how the body will express itself. It's not just all in the face, but the body too. If the face is expressing all these emotions, but the body is quite static, then it can take away from the impact. So for example, if your character is feeling particularly angry, you would expect them to be quite tense and maybe even a bit animated. Depends on the personality, obviously. Now, a lot of artists will have a mirror nearby, or they'll take photos of themselves or their family members striking particular poses, and that can help a lot. But also what can help is that when you're next out and about in a cafe or something, just observe how other people interact and how they use their body to tell stories to each other or to converse or to convey particular emotions. Obviously, don't do that in a creepy way, just as a general rule. And if you can't do that, then have a look at films. See how different actors express themselves and express their dialogue, and take note of their body language as well as their facial expressions. If you do this a lot and make that a habit, then you'll have this visual library that you can draw upon when you're creating your own comics. These guidelines are not there to be rigid, you must follow these in this particular order, but if you have particular things that you can pull from, then it can help you create loads of different characters with loads of different personalities and make them a bit more interesting and memorable rather than generic. As with all the videos in this series, these are based on Scott McCloud's Making Comics book, which I really recommend that you get if you're interested in making comics, because it's really good. I've been Brinkley, have fun drawing, and I'll see you in the next one.